Brrr, it's cold outside. Oh my goodness. 1 degrees. What am I belly aching about? It's Alaska. What do you expect? It's like living in Miami and complaining about the heat. You live in Miami. Well, good morning to you, and welcome to the Dan Fagan Radio Show here on KOIN, KVNT, broadcasting to you every weekday morning, 6 to 9. Streaming danfagan.us. Glad you're here. Glad you found us. You can email me, shoot me an email, as the kids say today. Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com. You can also give me a call, 569-1080, 569-1080. Happy to have you participate in the broadcast this morning. Lots of stuff to get to. If you like stuff, this is the place to be. Ethan Berkowitz looks like he's going to run for mayor. He hasn't said for sure, but it sounds like he's pretty serious about it. A Democrat has yet to jump into the race, so he'll stake out that ground. I think this is probably bad news for Halcrow. Halcrow is conservative on oil and gas taxes, but he's hard left on everything else. So I would imagine Berkowitz, for those on the left looking for somebody to vote for, Berkowitz will give them another option, because the left, they're not big fans of oil companies, and yet Halcrow has promoted a competitive environment for the oil industry, and so they can invest here. And leftists don't care much for that. That's why they love Bill Walker. So that'll make things interesting. I would imagine this is going to hurt. If it's going to hurt anybody, it's going to hurt Ethan, or hurt Halcrow. Of course, Halcrow had to expect that someone was going to come in with a D in front of their name. We didn't have a D run in the governor's race. We got to have a D in the mayor's race, right? These guys aren't totally giving up, are they? Hope not. Ethan Berkowitz is a man I admire. I do. I really admire the guy. He's very smart, and he's a good man. I think I could say that I know him well enough to say he's a really good fella. High levels of integrity, and just a really good man. Very smart, very smart. Now, obviously, his worldview is very different than mine, and we probably disagree on a lot of things. But I don't know. Who's in there? Who's in there that's better than Berkowitz? Well, you've got Amy Demboski, very green, very inexperienced, conservative. Yes, probably her and I probably agree on just about everything. But is she ready to be mayor? That's the question. Dan Coffey, good old boy, well connected, has committed himself to anti-free market causes because of his business. That's troubling to me. He's very, very connected. Mayor Dan Sullivan endorses him. It really bothers me that he's come out against the Uber thing for hire. That Uber thing, that thing's like a benchmark to me. That's like if we're going to be a country that is a free market embracing country, that Uber thing's kind of like if we lose Uber, the free market is pretty much dead in this country, because it is such a great idea. It works so well. It is such a no-brainer. And those who came up with the model should be commended, and the free market would reward them. The only way they lose is if the government comes in and says, no, we're going to allow the special interest of cab drivers to take away Uber's great idea, and we're going to thwart the free market as a result. Now, Dan Coffey was married to that. He was one of the leading guys fighting that. That troubles me greatly. I don't like it when people thwart the free market. So that's kind of a real hard sticking point with me and coffee. Then you got Andrew Halcrow, who is literally Karl Marx, except for on all taxes. I mean, this guy's so far left on everything. It just, I think he'd probably, Halcrow, I would imagine, would probably call for a gay rights bill every 6 weeks. I mean, he just would push that agenda so hard. That's a big thing to him. So yeah, that's not going to work. So it's tough. It's a tough call. It's a tough call. We'll see. We'll see how things play out and what the candidates say. But I'll tell you, the thing about Berkowitz is he's smart. He's a good man. He's intelligent, as I said. And when you get down to the city level, worldviews play less of a role as they do on the state level, on the national level. But we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. If indeed Berkowitz does run, it'll certainly make things interesting. Governor Walker says, "Hey, get ready, state employees, get ready. We're going to be cutting. We'll see. We'll see what Vince Beltrami lets him do." Jim Duncan, who is probably the second most powerful guy in the state, he's the head of the Alaska State Employees Association. He says unions are bracing for job losses. He said they've been told that 300 positions were going to be cut. 300 positions out of 24,000? How will we survive? How will we make it? Cutting 300 of 24,000. I don't know how it'll happen. We'll all be on the streets with tin cups in our hands begging for food if they're going to cut 300 state workers out of 24,000. That's state workers now. That doesn't include the 9,000 teachers or the 20,000 city employees. That's just state workers. We have 24,000 of them, and they're going to cut 300. What a bold move. Walker spokesperson Grace Jang said legislators were getting the budget ready for Wednesday, or they were working on it Wednesday evening in advance of it being made public today. This afternoon is going to be made public. And Walker sent a note out to state employees telling them what to brace for. I wouldn't be too worried if I was a state employee. There's 24,000 of you in here, and 300 are going to lose your job. I think you'll probably be safe. I think you'll probably. They're going to start with positions that aren't filled now. I wonder if anyone will actually be laid off. I wonder. 569-1080. 569-1080 is the number. You can email me Dan Fagan Show, iCloud.com. It's 1 degrees in the city of Anchorage. Time 6:14. Good morning. Well, good morning, 616, Dan Fagan. Dan Fagan Show on KOIN, KVNT. So the governor wants to cut 300 of the 24,000 state workers because he's getting serious about the budget. He'll probably start with the temporary exempt employees. That'd probably be where he'll start out. Of course, we don't know how many. It's hard to figure out how many temporary exempt appointments there are because most people holding those positions, well, they're well connected and they're certainly more than 300 cited as the likely number of layoffs. So, as far as permanent, full-time state workers, I would imagine there probably will be no blood there. Now, Art Chance, who's a fellow who's really no state, you get so much more information on Art Chance than the Daily News Reporter. It's unbelievable. Art Chance is a guy, a former state employee, and he's a commenter on the Daily News. And I'm telling you, he's such a better reporter than the actual article that he comments on. And listen to what he writes. This is in response to Pat Forgy's story. Walker warns Alaska state employees of layoffs. Art writes, were I a union leader, I might also be raising holy hell about compensation, especially executive compensation, in quasi-governments. It even brings out my inner socialist to think that we're contemplating cuts in Department of Public Safety, Department of Corrections, while briefcase toters and quasis are making $200,000 a year and more. In fact, were I governor, I might think about requiring quasis who rely on state funding rather than their own revenue to pay from the state pay plan. I might think about that for the university too. In the executive branch, I could buy a master's or PhD who actually did work for 80 to 100,000. The U pays 2 or 3 times that for someone who teaches a class or two. And let's not look at what they pay administrators. Talking about the university. That is true. Some of these college professors that are tenured, they'll literally teach 2 classes a week, and they're making 6 figures. Art goes on to write, there are lots of ways to cut hundreds of millions of dollars from the state budget, but they take knowing how the government actually works and knowing where to look. It also takes state managers who are actually interested in the welfare of their program and union leaders who are interested in the welfare of their members. We'll see if interest in maintaining access and accessibility to people in high places trumps doing your job, because it's always easy to lay off clerks and janitors. Well, you know, this is one of the things that Bill Walker ran on that got a lot of conservatives voting for him. Because Mr. Parnell did not have a very good record on cutting the budget. He did in his last 2 years in office once the bipartisan coalition in the Senate broke up. But when there was Governor Parnell and the bipartisan coalition in the Senate, literally these guys spent money like you wouldn't believe. Now, Mr. Parnell would say, well, it was because of the bipartisan coalition. And I never bought that, because as a governor, he has a line on veto, and he could have cut a lot of that spending with a stroke of the pen. So that's the reason I think Governor Parnell did not get reelected by some, because he did not cut as much as those in the conservative movement would like to have had him cut. And Walker, of course, came along and said, I'll cut. Here's my buddy Vince Beltrami. That never washed with me. And now he's saying he's going to lay off 300 workers. Well, we've got 24,000. I'd like to see 5,000 cut, frankly. You say, oh, Dan, that'd be devastating. No, I don't think it would. You know, the thing about government is it's inefficient. It takes 3 government employees to do what 1 employee in the private sector would do. And that's just true, folks. You can't fire state employees. If you're bad at your job and your manager comes after you, your union delegate is going to step in there and protect you. And that's how it rolls in the government sector. You can't fire teachers. I've had Carol Como on this show explain to me the process of firing a teacher. If you have a teacher, you hire them right out of the gate and they're on the job a month and they're a total disaster, you can't fire them. They're going to stay in the school for at least that year. And I said, well, what do you do with the students? She said, well, there have been times where we have transferred teachers out of the classroom because we knew that they just couldn't handle the teaching. I said, well, what would they do? And she wouldn't really come out and admit basically busy work, but that was the only conclusion we could come to. If they're not going to be able to teach, there'll be others. She'd say, well, we find other things for them to do. Well, like what? They're teachers. Does it involve children? Well, not teaching, but other things. Like what? And she wouldn't give me the answer. So that's how government works. In the private sector, if you're on the job and in a month in, it's obvious you cannot do the job, then you're let go. And they take the money they were giving you and they bring in somebody else. And it gets even worse. It gets even worse when no, I can't see my call screener. You have to write it on the board. It gets even worse when the teachers are tenured. Then try to fire someone. Do we have a call? Oh, I can't see. You have to write on the board. Yeah. It gets even worse when you get a tenured teacher. Then try firing somebody. I mean, if you got, like, as we had in the ASD about 4 or 5 years ago, if you have cocaine dripping out of your nose, as one teacher did, you can fire them then. But when it comes to actually performing on the job, no, we're not gonna let you go for that. We don't expect you to actually do the job. 569-1080, 569-1080. Let's go to Tom. Good morning, Tom.
Morning, Mr. Dan.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. It's always been said to me that the reason the state and the government, and for that matter, probably the city, pays so well is because if they don't, then they can't get any good employees because they'll all go to the high-paying private sector jobs. Now, if that's true, then no one in this state should have to worry about laying off 5,000 of these overpaid state workers because they can easily go get one of these super high-paying private sector jobs.
Yeah.
And save the taxpayers a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
And in my time, and in my life right now, and has been for the last 52 years, a couple bucks saved is still a couple bucks saved rather than a couple bucks pissed away on someone that just really isn't worth it.
Well, Tom, on average, a government employee makes in salary and benefits 35% more than the person holding a similar job in the private sector.
Well, that's 35% more than I think they're worth them, in my opinion. Because I got good friends. My best friend in the world works for the federal government. I swear I get closer to turning him to the right side every year, but he just insists on voting for the Democrats. It's going to keep him employed, and he makes, I think his hourly rate is $54 an hour. That's a lot more than anybody I know. And I just think that's ridiculous.
Well, when you factor in his pension, his days off, his health care, and his benefit package, it's even more lucrative, his compensation package.
Oh, I hear you. Our guys are at about $69 an hour is what I pay my guys with benefits. And I have a certain number of core people that I love dearly, and I hope I take better care of them than anybody. But I don't get public. I'm a private employer, but that's my business. But I just don't believe that that any any government worker that, I mean, this is not a guy that's out saving lives. He's not a surgeon out in the battlefield. This is a guy who does administrative work for civilians on military installations. And it's just unbelievable. I just think it's unbelievable. And I think that if Governor Walker wants to make any reasonable cut, 300 out of 24,000 just doesn't do it. He might as well slap us in the face. And if these employees, if the consensus is they'll make, we have to pay them the exuberant salaries to keep good employees. Well, then if they're so darn good, they shouldn't have a problem finding other work in other places in the private sector and be just as happy.
Would you agree with me, Tom, that, and I agree with everything you're saying, but would you also say that there are a lot of government employees, city, state, and federal, who are good employees and do try their best? It's the system that encourages incompetency and discourages excellence, because you can't be fired. There's no bottom line mentality. And really, that's what drives the inefficiency in government. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think there are, let's take the state, for example, there's 24,000 state employees. I'll bet you out of that 24,000, there are quite a few good, honest, hardworking people that just want to save money. I have never met them, but I bet I'm not trying to be I know that might have sounded funny, and I'm not meaning any disrespect to our state employees. I haven't met one yet that I think truly feels that way. Maybe I have and I don't know it.
Yeah.
I know that my friend who works for the federal government, I have two friends that work for the federal government. After 52 years, you meet a lot of people, you make a lot of friends. I know two of them that work for the federal government. One brags about his $120,000 a year, and every time I've ever called him at work, because that's the only time he wants me to call him at work, because he doesn't have to pay for the phone bill or so. I don't know why. I don't know how that works with the Skype computer crap. I don't know any of that stuff, but he's never actually working.
Yeah.
They have potlucks down there in this control center down in Auburn, Washington.
Yeah.
He never worked.
Right.
And then my other friend is an honest, hardworking guy that all he wants to do is save the taxpayers' money.
Well, Tom, I believe that we're going to turn this country around. I believe that Mr. Obama has exposed the left and the labor unions, and we now realize that the best way to go is the private sector. We just won Congress. We need to get a good president in there. Unfortunately, I think we need a new leader in Alaska, too. I'm afraid that Mr. Walker's too cozy with the unions, but I think we're going to head in the right direction. I'm still optimistic, but I appreciate your call. Thanks, Tom. 6:30, Dan Fagan Show. All right, 6:35, Dan Fagan Show. Good morning to you on this, the 5th day of February, 2015. Email me, Dan Fagan Show at iCloud.com, or you can go to our Facebook page, Dan Fagan Show Facebook page. Send me a message that way or comment on it. Also, you can give us a call, 569-1080. 569-1080. You know, journalism, the media business, it's an interesting profession, and really your commodity that you're selling is your credibility. It's all you have really as a journalist. And Brian Williams has taken a major hit, NBC news anchor. He apologized last night, and I'm quoting here: "I made a mistake in recalling the events of 12 years ago." Here's what, by the way, if a Fox News anchor had done this, oh my goodness, would there be a firestorm? Here's the story. Brian Williams, the nation's top-rated news anchor, admitted lying about being forced down by enemy fire in a helicopter over Iraq a dozen years ago. Williams apologized Wednesday evening. Earlier, the NBC anchor told Stars and Stripes, which is a military newspaper, they broke the story. "I would not have chosen to make this mistake. I don't know what screwed up in my mind that caused me to conflate one aircraft with another." Williams did not make the claim in reporting on the incident in 2003, but he told the false story on the air in 2013 and lied about it again last Friday. The admission, and what he basically lied about, is that he was shot down, or that the plane he was on was fired at. The admission raises serious questions about his credibility in a business that values that quality above all else. Williams is the longest-running serving network anchor. His NBC Nightly News has been number one in the ratings for nearly all of last decade. For such a high-profile journalist to acknowledge that he essentially invented a story that dramatized his bravery in a war zone is hard to fathom. This is according to Howard Kurtz, media critic. Williams said he had misremembered the story and was sorry. I think that it would be hard to misremember whether you were being fired at. That's I can misremember things, but I've never really been. I would think being fired at would be something that would be pretty strongly into your brain. 2013 interview with Letterman, Williams said, "We were in some helicopters. What we didn't know was we were north of the invasion. We were the northmost Americans in Iraq. We were going to drop some bridge portions across the Euphrates so the 3rd Infantry could come across them. 2 of our 4 helicopters were hit by ground fire, including the one I was in." Williams repeated the tale last week as he was paying tribute at a New York Rangers hockey game to a retired soldier who provided security for the guarded helicopters while Williams was in Iraq. The story actually started with a terrible moment a dozen years ago, back during the invasion of Iraq, when the helicopter we were traveling in was forced down after being hit. This is what Brian Williams told viewers. Our traveling NBC News team was rescued, surrounded, and kept alive by an armored mechanized platoon from the U.S. Army 3rd Infantry. That was Williams' account. But Kurtz writes, but his account was contradicted by crew members of the 159th Aviation Regiment on board a Chinook copter that was hit by 2 rockets and small arms fire. They told Stars and Stripes that Williams was nowhere near that helicopter and 2 other Chinooks in the formation that took fire. The anchor and his NBC crew arrived in the area west of Baghdad on another helicopter about an hour later, they told the newspaper. The chopper landed because of an Iraq sandstorm and was grounded by weather for 2 days. Here's what Sergeant First Class Joseph Miller said. "No, we never came under direct fire. to the aircraft. The flight engineer of Williams helicopter was quoted as saying, some of the crew members on the Chinook that were hit were very upset with the anchor's now discredited claim. Lance Reynolds, the flight engineer, told Stars and Stripes it had been a life-changing trauma and felt like a personal experience that someone else wanted to participate in and didn't deserve to participate in. NBC trumped the Williams saga, airing a story on March 26, 2003, with the headline, Target Iraq, helicopters NBC's Brian Williams was riding and comes under fire. But he did not claim to be in the down chopper, saying, on the ground, we learned the Chinook ahead of us was almost blown out of the sky. Yeah, that's a big hit. That's a big hit for Williams. You know, journalism today, especially TV journalism, has become so competitive. And there's always the gotcha story, and get the major interview with the major player who's in the news at that moment. Sharon Lahow told me when she was press secretary for Governor Palin, she would literally get personal phone calls from anchors. Diane Sawyer would call her. At the time, what was the guy who was ABC? I forget his name. I mean, the big time people, the main anchors for the networks would call her personally, say, we'd like to get an exclusive interview with Governor Palin. It's such a cutthroat business. And you figure Brian Williams, he falls prey to that too. And if a couple of helicopters an hour ahead of him take fire and are shot at and hit, I'm sure in his mind he thought, well, I could just say I was on one of those. It's so funny. It's so funny how when we try to justify things in our own mind. And it worked, it worked for how many years? 11, 12 years. He got away with the lies. Now, the price he's paying for the gain he got from it's obviously not worth it at all. You wonder, when people take shortcuts like that, like Bill Belichick with the Patriots videotaping the other team's defensive signals, which is clearly illegal. The guy's got so much going for him. Why would you take a shortcut like that? Same with Williams. He was already number one. I don't know if he was back then, but he is now. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Maybe people started watching him because they thought he was shot at. I have no idea. But it's funny how our mind will trick us into thinking, I'll take this shortcut. I'll take the easy route instead of the right route, and we justify it in our minds, and then look, it just all blows up in our face. And it's all fear, isn't it? Isn't it fear? The fear of not being number one. Fear is so devastating and debilitating. It causes us to do things we shouldn't do. That's just how life works. That's why I've always thought, man, if you can go through life fearless, and you are one powerful individual. You are one powerful. You are someone to be reckoned with if you are fearless. And it is possible. It is possible. 569-1080, 569-1080. Lots coming up. We'll take your phone calls. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Show, broadcasted on KOAN 95.1. Also, 1080 AM in Anchorage, out in the Valley, 95.2 FM, 1020 AM. Dan Fagan Show, 644, it's 0 degrees right now in Anchorage. 646, Dan Fagan Show. Coming up on the broadcast this morning, David Neese, education activist. He always has great information for us. Also, Mal Tosi works with kids and does a lot to help really youth in trouble, people who live in poor neighborhoods, try to get ahead in life. Looking forward to talking to Mal. Our number 569-1080. 569-1080. That's the number you can call us at if you'd like. So this Brian Williams things, they're now saying that they're starting to look at other things that Brian Williams has done and thinking there might be a pattern here. Brian Williams, if you haven't heard, was he says he misremembered being shot at in an airplane. Misremembered. So now they're beginning to look at some of his tales regarding Katrina. Brian Williams' Katrina tales under scrutiny after helicopter lie. This is according to Nick Sanchez, columnist. NBC anchor Brian Williams apologized on Wednesday for falsely claiming his helicopter was downed by RPG during the 2003 invasion of Iraq. And now many are actively fact-checking his other extraordinary claims from over the years. Under heavy scrutiny, less than 24 hours after Williams' admission are his tales from Hurricane Katrina. In one story, Williams claims he saw a body float by his hotel room window in New Orleans. In another, he claims his 5-year-old hotel was overrun with gangs while he was sick with floodwater dysentery and was rescued from a stairwell by police officers. Williams also recounted the first story about the floating corpse in 2006 interview, and then he repeated it to another blogger. Here's what he said. When you look out your window room in the French Quarter and watch a man float face down, when you see bodies that you saw in Bangladesh and Indonesia, you swore to yourself that you would never see in your country. These Americans, these are our brothers and sisters, and one of them was floating by. You know, I saw Williams interviewed after Katrina, and he said one of the most disgusting things I've ever heard. And he was talking to one of the people who had first responders. And he made the accusation that people in the black neighborhoods were not prioritized. He made that accusation. Now, we all know Brian Williams is a leftist. We know his news coverage is very left of center. And as you know, most leftists believe that America is a nation of racists. So when Williams said that, it made me realize, okay, this is a guy who's clearly a pure leftist. I know some of the folks who were involved in the first respond at Katrina. And what Williams basically did was accuses them of being racist. And it's outrageous. The idea that someone who works in that field would say, let's go get the white people out first. That's how blinding leftism, folks, is. You look at the media and you look at the nonsense they feed down our throats, and you think, how can they give us this nonsense? Well, they're just so blind. I mean, Brian Williams honestly believed racism played a role in Katrina, in the rescue of the citizens who were there. Now, listen, New Orleans proper, the city limits of New Orleans, is about 60% black. So when you look at the majority of the victims being black, I can see how you say, well, they didn't care about the black people. 60% of New Orleans is black. Of course, most of the victims are going to be black because the majority of the people who live there are black. Now that's the inner city. That's the city limits. That's not including the suburbs and the surrounding areas. But most of the problems happen in New Orleans proper. And I just thought that was such a disgusting thing to say. To impugn the character and the integrity and the motive of these heroes. Listen, when Katrina hit, there were gangs of people with guns, looting, and robbing. Here's what Brian Williams did not tell you and would never tell you. There was more property damage done in New Orleans by the looting than the actual storm. People going through the stores because the police left, everybody left. So these gangs, these drug dealing gangs, and New Orleans was flush with them. They literally just went through the town and just took what they wanted. And it ended up costing more than the actual storm. The mayor of New Orleans was up on the top floor of the Hyatt Regency Hotel, terrified. He was afraid people were going to find him and come and try to kill him. It was chaos. And these first responders went straight into the heart of that situation and still tried to rescue people. And here, Brian Williams, who probably lives in a $2 million penthouse in Manhattan, is going to impugn the integrity of these first responders who got in little boats trying to get as many people as they could out of their attics and their roofs and get them to safety. And to think, oh, there's a black person, let's move on. There's a white person over here. Come on. Are you kidding me? You know, we get upset with the left because they just say the most ridiculous, they say and believe the most ridiculous stuff. But the reality is, you know, they're just blind. It's just a blindness. So I've not been a Brian Williams fan from that point on. And of course, you know, NBC News as the news division is very hard left. Even, you know, CBS is too, and of course ABC is too. I'm good friends with a gal who produced for Diane Sawyer. She was her main producer when Diane Sawyer was anchored over at ABC, and she was such a hard leftist too. Her and I worked as a news reporter in Louisiana, and she's just a hard left gal. And we all know that the networks, they all lean left in their coverage. Can you imagine if a Fox News anchor made up a story about being shot down? Can you imagine? Wow, wow, wow. And here's what I love about NBC. Here's all you need to know about NBC News. So here, bottom line is Brian Williams lied. There's just no disputing that. You don't not know you don't think you were being shot down, and then you just know that. So here's how NBC News spins the thing on their website. NBC nightly news anchor Brian Williams on Wednesday's program offered a clarification of the events that led to his news team being protected by the 3rd Infantry in Iraq in 2003. A clarification. And then they go on to say that Mr. Williams misremembered. That's not even a word. Is that the new politically correct word for lying? I mean, have you ever heard that word before, misremembered? Yeah, you know, I was a Marine and I saved 1,000 lives when I was over in Iraq. No, you didn't. Oh, I may have misremembered that. Come on, misremembered? Misremembered. How much of a fool do these people play us for? He misremembered. Yeah, I used to be a starting quarterback for LSU. I won the Heisman. No, you didn't. Oh, yeah, well, maybe I misremembered that. Yeah, I just misremembered that. I've never heard that word. Well, we'll see. We'll see how this plays out and whether this affects Mr. Williams' credibility. Again, as I said, we all have lied. Every single one of us has lied. I don't care who you are. I don't know. My dad used to always say to me, "I've never lied to you before. I'm not going to lie to you now." And as far as I know, my dad never lied to me. But I guarantee you, my dad probably lied at one point. I know I've lied. Lying is part of life. You don't want to do it. Normally, when we lie out of fear. My dog ate my homework kind of stuff. We're afraid that if people know the truth, they'll be mad at us. It'll make us look bad. It'll hurt our image, whatever. So we lie. And I'm not sitting in judgment of Mr. Williams asking for him to be Mr. Perfect. But just like we should hold our police to a higher standard, we should hold our news anchors and our journalists to a higher standard. Because that's really all a journalist has. I remember I was talking to Mary Landrieu's press secretary once. And Mary Landrieu's press secretary, she was senator in Louisiana. This is back when I was a reporter in Louisiana. She was running against a guy who was district attorney in Baton Rouge. And I asked the press secretary, I said, well, is Miss Landrieu worried about Doug Moreau, I think was his name. And he says, it's a direct quote. I'm talking to him on the phone. So she's not worried about a pissant like that. So I quoted him on the paper. I quoted him on the news that night. Said talking to the so and so, and he denied saying it. So it was basically my word against his. Well, I had been a reporter a long time at that point, and I knew, I'm not going to make up something that somebody said and jeopardize my entire journalism career. But that's how it works in journalism. You have to be able to trust your reporter, and you have to know they're honest. 569-1080, 658, Dan Fagan Show. 6 minutes past 7 o'clock. Good morning to you on a Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. It is a Thursday morning, and we are happy that you found us. Our telephone number 569-1080, 569-1080. Want to welcome education activist David Neese to the broadcast. David, good morning to you.
Good morning, Dan. How you doing today?
I'm well. I appreciate you calling in. What's on your mind today? What are you working on?
Well, last time we spoke about 2 weeks ago, the session was kind of firing up, and the ASD hadn't presented its budget, so we've had a lot of testimony on the state side, and ASD's trotted out its budget for next year. So, what would you like to talk about?
Well, you tell me. Let's talk about the ASD budget. What's your thought on it? Was it some 800 billion or something? Was it? 780 or?
If you add in the pass-through funds that, because the governor made a big bill last year that helped reduce PERS TERS, it's $1.5 billion. But
wow.
There's $700 million of pass-through funds.
So the 1.5, the rest goes to PERS and TERS?
Yeah, about $700 million goes to PERS and TERS.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, and I think most do, but the PERS and TERS is the pension liability that we have as a result of a lot of these tier 1 contracts where, we're just literally
tier 1, 2, and 3.
Yeah. And like under tier 1, if you were a teacher, what was the most what was the minimum you could work until you could retire? Do you know?
Well, you're vested after, I believe, 4 years, but you don't really get much of a retirement until you're 10 years in.
But then how many years would you have to work to get full retirement? Do you remember?
Let's see. Full retirement, well, it was 2% a year, and then after 20 years, it was 2.5%. So if you put in 20 years, you got 40% of your paycheck, basically.
Yeah, so if you're 22, you're literally 42 years old, you're still going to get 40% of your paycheck the rest of your life.
Right, but that deal's gone. I mean, they've changed.
Well,
it.
It's not gone.
Well, okay.
There are people who still come under tier 1, but we changed it.
And if you look at the municipality and you look at the ASD, about a third to a half of your employees that are still working there are under one of those 3 tiers.
Right.
So they're still earning it.
Right. Exactly. I mean, the bottom line is, like they say, once you hire a government employee, you own them the rest of their lives. And people, especially if you're a female and you live to 90, you'll end up being more on your pension than you will actually have earned your salary. Correct?
Yeah, probably. That's
yeah,
probably fairly correct.
And so that's that extra $700 million we had to spend this year to keep up with that pension plan.
Yeah, the state is generous, and when the actuaries did the arithmetic and came up and said, we're a little short on what we got coming up across the horizon, the state said, well, that was our fault, and we'll go ahead and help pay that off, so you guys won't have to pay it off.
Yeah.
So they really haven't raised the amount the city or the school districts have to contribute. They said, we'll make up the difference, our mistake.
Gotcha. But still, when you're talking, it doesn't really matter where the money comes from. Bottom line is this year, money that has gone toward education was $1.5 million.
Yeah, and it was $3 billion is what the governor paid down on the $12 billion debt, I think what it was. And they're actually earning really good returns on it, so it's actually going to drop what the state pays the school district from about roughly $100 million to like $70 million pass-through money next year. But when you're looking at the budget, it's all in there.
Yeah. So anything stand out to you about the actual budget?
Yeah, we have the budget. There's an issue with the number that they use because they do an estimate, and then in October the state does a count of how many children you have sitting in class for a week in October. And earlier in the year, when they just got done with it, they said there was 47,001 children sitting in the ASD. They pay for about 70,000 when you get done with the formula, but the district's basing their budget on 47,700 something. And I was talking to Dave Boyle the other day, and he was a little upset because the number on the state's website had changed and how many kids were sitting in classes in October. So we don't quite know how many there are, but we do know the number's declining. And that's
and they can't track that.
Well, it's like you lose 500 kids, you should sort of know, that you lost 500 kids.
Sure.
And they added, I want to say 200 or 300 teachers while they lost 1,000 some odd students, and they haven't closed any buildings. So,
Wow.
yeah. So
And-
little things in the budget stand out. The municipality yesterday exempted charter schools.
Yes.
Charter schools that are not housed in ASD buildings, and there's only one charter school housed in an ASD building.
Yeah.
Their buildings are now tax exempt, so now you have more buildings pulled off the tax rolls, which means that people that own houses will have to pay a little bit more.
Yeah. But doesn't that encourage more charter schools?
Might encourage more charter schools, especially if you got a piece of property that would benefit from having a tax break and not having to pay taxes. So
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's kind of interesting.
We learned yesterday from David David Boyle, that in the last 10 years, the Anchorage School District budget has gone up 60%, I think he said, and yet we've lost, 6,000 students, or was it 6% of the population?
6% of the population. It's up. Okay, this is like going back to that seat time thing. They've either lost 1,000 children,
Yeah.
or they've lost 1,500 children. We don't quite know which one it is.
It's amazing they can't track that.
Well, and it's kind of interesting. You budget for kids you may or may not have, and the thing is, the way the state pays is they say count the kids for this week in October, and we'll do your average membership for the day, and that's what we pay you on. So it behooves you to have as many children as possible in school in that 1 week in October. Yeah. So
Wow.
anyway, in the budget, and one of the other interesting things is the board and the superintendent were unable to control their own budgets. So they put an amount out there, and then the board ran over about 70% of what they were supposed to.
70%.
Yeah, and they're instead of spending like let's see, the salary on the board is like $27,000. Last year they spent $100,000 per board member, about $700,000. The budget was the budget was like $140. So.
No. Did they offer an explanation for that?
No, that's the beauty of the ASD budgeting policy. You can't figure out what they spend on it. It's probably law because it's contracted services or supplies, so they had a heck of a lot of supplies then. And then, but the superintendent's office did much better. They ran a little over $1 million past what their budget was.
$1 million?
Yeah, about what their
and
budget was.
What was their overall?
No idea.
What do you mean?
No idea what they spent it on.
No, but what is their overall budget if they went $1 million over?
Sorry. The superintendent's office is roughly budgeted for about $600,000 to $650,000 a year. So
Wait.
2.5.
They get $650,000 to spend, and they spent $1,650,000.
$1.5 million, yeah.
And no one's asking.
No, yeah, nobody even. I mean, apparently, you don't have to worry about that if you're. That's the people watching the chicken house.
Wow.
That's the fox guarding the hen house. It's like, okay, yeah, so we had a budget overrun of a lot, and that's okay. And so they budget for almost exactly the same amount this year as they did last year, even though they ran over a huge amount last year.
And of course, the media is not interested in covering any of this.
No. That's just nothing.
Education activist David Neitz is our guest. We'll continue with him. Mal Tosi joins us later. 7:15, Dan Fagan Show. All right, 7:16 is the time here on the Dan Fagan Show. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. We're speaking with education activist David Neese about all things education. That's just astonishing to me, David, that the school board has gone, what did you say, $70,000 over their budget?
Well, they wouldn't see. I think it was 70 or 80,000. They budget a certain amount, and then they just ran over supplies and services.
So the budget really means nothing.
Apparently not, but they keep about 10% of their budget in reserve, so they got about $80 million that they've got squirreled away. I think
80 million.
Yeah.
80 million in the bank.
The 80 million in the bank. That's how That's all. This year the big thing is, we're not laying off any teachers. Well, they drew $17 million out of the bank to cover the shortfall, and they amped up their spending to take care of the surplus. So, yeah, I think the interesting thing is that it seems to be very fluid numbers. The big important thing is that a week from Friday, running for school board closes. So if you're interested in going in and making changes in the school board, if you're one of the listeners, that's a citywide race, and anybody that's a citizen in Anchorage can run for it. Yeah. And it would be nice to have somebody in there that would go like, okay, so hey, hold it. We went 70% over on our budget. We're predicting we're going to spend the exact same amount that we spent before. We went 70% over. We're not even going to up it a little bit.
David, isn't it true that, and this is not certainly isolated to Anchorage, but isn't it true that typically teachers' unions control school boards?
Most definitely in most school boards in the state of Alaska, with the exception of the rural attendance area school boards, which are the non-borough school boards, are dominated by the people that would be supported by the school employees. So on the Anchorage school board, 6 of the 7 members had backing of the teachers union.
Well, we had, what was his name? The education guy. You guys have him coming up again.
Chavez?
Yeah, Chavez. What's his first name?
I've forgotten.
Yeah,
I know he's coming up for school choice week too. I should know.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, he was brilliant, and he said we've got to get rid of school boards because the teachers union, they have all the cash because the government forces, especially in states like Alaska where there's no right to work. The teachers union forces, or the government forces teachers to give cash to the teachers union, and then they control most of the candidates because they can give a ton of money to each of the candidates that they want elected, especially in Alaska and Anchorage where it's citywide. It's not like in the assembly you have a conservative district and then you have a liberal district, and there's it mixes up the representation. But when it's citywide, you got to have a lot of money to be able to win that race. You can't go knock on every door in the city. And because you need all that money.
It's tough as being a mayor, yep.
What's that?
It's just as tough as being a mayoral candidate.
Yes.
You literally have to go citywide.
Yes. And the teachers union, which has all this cash that the government forces people to give it, then it's just a monopoly.
Well, it's more like a I call it a Democratic retirement home because we have 2 former legislators sitting on our Anchorage school board.
Mary Croft and who else?
Betty Davis.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so and then you have Patty Higgins' husband, Pat Higgins.
Right.
And she was the head of the Democratic Party. So you could probably say 3 out of the 7 members are probably fully affiliated with the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
But, it's a nonpartisan election, all brought to you by the League of Women Voters.
Yeah.
They decided this is a great way to go. But
sure.
We like, that's just part of the game. So, yes, most of the school boards in the state are dominated by people that would have not voted for Mr. Purnell.
and then, when you start coming to the issues of having more choice and more competition and more accountability, well, that's the last thing the teachers union dominated school board is going to want.
Yeah, exactly. And they'll fight it all the way. We have the most restrictive school choice law in the nation.
Sure.
Most states allow the school board to have a say, but anybody can charter out a charter school.
Are you familiar with Dina Paramo out at the Matsu School District?
Yes.
She's amazing, and she's the
She is
complete
an
opposite.
amazing, yeah, she's an amazing superintendent. The one down in Kenai was an amazing superintendent.
Oh, is that right?
And he's now working for UAA, so that'll be
Okay.
interesting.
Well, yeah.
I wanted to mention at the state level,
Yeah.
we have a couple things going on. They made a cut to the budget in Governor Walker's proposal that really is kind of an interesting thing, because if you remember, the big battle last spring was whether or not we were going to increase the BSA. And,
BSA.
base student allocation.
Okay.
That's the calculation at the beginning of a very long calculation that takes $5,000 and through a bunch of manipulations and anchorage results in it about a $11,000 payment. That's what I was saying. We've got 47,000 kids. We pay for 75,000 kids.
Wow. That's
So
amazing.
if you can increase that front number, it increases everything coming out. But the House stood really firm last year and says we don't want to increase the BSA. The Senate said we do. They struck a compromise and they increased it like $50 this year, $50 next year, and $50 the year after. But then they put all this money outside of the budget. And so there's $100 million that was supposed to be put into the budget for education next year outside the formula.
Right.
And Governor Walker took like $80 million of that away and said, "Oh, we got a cut."
It's not a cut.
Well, I'm going like, if I give you $100, I take 80 back. You didn't get a cut.
Yeah, but the media didn't tell you that, did they? I fell for it. Yeah, I fell for that when he first got up there and said, "I'm cutting education 2.5%." I got on the radio next morning and thought, I can't believe this. In all my years of covering government, I've never seen education cut. And I went on and praised him. And then, of course, people like you and others called me and said, no. It's a shell game. There's no cut.
Yeah.
I fell for it.
I'm not taking as big a commission out of your salary as I used to take.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel really good about that.
Exactly. There's no cutting in education. There's no crying in baseball, and there's no cutting in education.
Yeah. So they're in the middle of doing all their preliminary data and stuff down in Juneau. But there is a bill for school choice week that's working through the House Education Committee.
But Walker's not going to sign that.
That's an interesting one because, last year that same exact bill was championed by Parnell. He put that out there, so we don't know.
Bill Walker is more pro-union than Bill Wielechowski.
I'm pretty sure that's probably about correct. One of the bills that may get the governor's signature, if it does make it through, is expanding education down below kindergarten. The Democrats are trotting out.
You like that idea or no?
No, I'm firmly against it. I think if you want to give child care to people, then you just call it child care. Yeah. It's in Department of Health and Human Services. It doesn't belong in education.
Well, look, it is statistically proven when you compare our nation to other nations and their education system, the longer the public education has your child, the stupider they get.
Or the less they improve is a better way of saying it, I think.
yeah, but it's actually literally they begin to drop off in competitiveness the longer you have them.
Right. And now one of the interesting things you have coming up is the state of Alaska has changed its examination system. It's gone to an online computer-based system. It'll take ASD 3 weeks to do what they used to do in 3 days. So it's not more efficient. Yeah, and the Commissioner of Education, Mr. Hanley, was saying that they fully anticipate a drop in scores across the board. So why are they employing this method? I'm going like, well, hold it. You've been telling everybody's doing really fine. When you look at the numbers, they're not really doing fine. But now you're going to say everybody's going to do worse. I think what you're going to do is probably get a closer snapshot to how our kids compare nationally. So I mean, it's got a good and a bad to it. There's a lot of data that's being gathered on the children. It has nothing to do with education that is going to be shared. So they're data mining your children, and there's a lot of parents that are upset about that. You know, I heard Bill. You know who Bill Bennett is, former Secretary of Education from Ronald Reagan. Yep. I heard him debating. I don't remember who it was he was debating, and he was Bill Bennett, who I respect, and I think he's a really smart guy. He was in favor of Common Core. He said a lot of what has been reported about Common Core just isn't true. Well, it all comes down to, you've got this really clear distinction about what are state and federal rights. And Lyndon Johnson declared war on poverty, and obviously we've won that. And at the same time, he declared war on public schools. And what you got to remember is he grew up in a poor part of Texas where he went to a 2-room schoolroom, and his dad was a sharecropper.
Yeah.
So he was probably in the poorest of the poor. He would have been economically disadvantaged. And he made his way out, and he was against that system. He says it's not fair. We got to break it down. Poor children don't get a break, and that was 50 years ago. And we are in the state of Alaska. The federal governments have come in and said that if you want to be exempted from No Child Left Behind, you have to accept these certain conditions in our new federal program. So you've got the federal government taking over a state responsibility, and that's where you get a lot of chasing in Alaska.
Well, Bennett he admitted he didn't like that component.
Yeah.
But he didn't find that the actual standards or the curriculum offensive.
Well, yeah, and then you can argue it up and down. Diane Ravitch, who's done a lot of reporting, she's not a fan of it. We have very low standards. The state of Alaska, the new standards are still very low compared to what the other nations have. We do a very poor job of educating our poor and disadvantaged children. Now, I'll give you an example. Singapore, which is a monoculture, their worst poor children, the bottom of the 10% of children, of the poorest children they've got, score better than our top 10% white Caucasian.
Wow.
In the United States.
Wow. We're talking to Dave. Talking to Dave Neese. Let's take a quick call. 569-1080. David, you're on with Dave Neese.
Yes, on that House resolution and Senate resolutions, those are concurrent resolutions, and they do not go to the governor for signature.
Oh.
And that's probably why they were introduced as resolutions.
Oh, so they're just resolutions, which really are meaningless.
Well, it does. It sends a signal to, let's say, the executive office and to the education industry in the state. It makes a statement that they
but if your
right.
allegiance is to Vince Beltrami, the statements don't really matter much, do they?
Well, it's like we're still here. Don't forget it. We have some power over here. I think that's it. But last year, Governor Parnell actually issued a proclamation.
How's that different than a resolution?
Well, he just does it on his own. He doesn't need the legislature.
Gotcha.
And this year, the legislature's
the school choice is dead as long as Walker's governor. Right.
Well, I wouldn't go as far as that. It depends what happens in the next during his 4-year term.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're really broke here in about 2 to 3 years, school choice will save money. I think Mr. Neese can say something about that.
Yeah. Well, actually, we're out of time.
Oh,
the two Davids.
All right. I'll check it back in about 2 weeks.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate both of you calling. All right. 569-1080, Dan Fagan Show. Time 7:30. Stay with us. 7:35. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show on KOAN in Anchorage, KVNT out in the Valley. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. Happy to welcome to the broadcast Mal Tosi. Mal, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thanks for having me, Dan.
It's absolutely my pleasure. I don't think, have we ever met?
I don't believe so. I was thinking the same thing.
Well, I've heard so many good things about you, and it's great to finally get to at least meet you over the phone.
I appreciate it. Yeah, no, just out here trying to do my part.
Well, I know you're really active in the community and that you're very focused on trying to make the community a better place. And I want to talk to you about this situation with, I know they're talking about now because some of the recent shootings, well, actually they're not talking about it. They decided to do it. The city has a gang task force. Is this something that you would say is something that could be productive and helpful?
What I think with the gang task force is that it was our reporting and tracking method, and without that, it's that we don't have a way of keeping track of those that are involved in gang crimes. So it's one of the solutions that should be out there in our community.
And do you think it could actually help because it'll just basically identify who's involved?
Well, I think with the growth of the city and continuing to grow in ethnicity as well, that we need to be able to track who's coming up here, who's up here, what our communities are doing here. So that's really important for us to know. Just in case these crimes do come up, that we're able to at least have a lead or connect with a leader on any side, just to start getting questions answered.
Well, I remember back in the day when I was a reporter for Channel 2, the city wouldn't even admit it had a gang problem when it obviously did.
Yeah.
So that was a big first step, do you think?
I think that definitely is where we're at now. That and we've seen patterns in the mid to late '90s. There was many shootings around those times as well out in our streets. Back in 2005, 2006, that was an issue as well. So we've seen these patterns, and it always does go back to our leaders and how they share this problem out there, because we just want to resolve as much of it as possible before it does get out of hand. But when it's shared that there is no problem, then there is no reason for a solution, and there's no reason, doesn't make it a priority to be funded to keep those in place.
How would you characterize the relationship between the police department and the community, especially what you would, I guess, you'd characterize some of the younger kids who live in poor neighborhoods in Anchorage? Do the police have a good relationship, or do we need improvement there?
I definitely think it needs improvement, because if we could, and that goes back to sharing that there is no gang problem, so there's no reason to build relations to work on those issues. So it is something that we, not only with the young but with the many communities that are now in Anchorage, it's very important to reestablish, to strengthen, to connect with these communities, just so they know that we welcome them, but that we want to build these relationships, that it is about trust.
So how do you build that? How do you build that trust?
Well, and there's many ways. I think one of the, lots of times what I like to look at is what do police officers and the community have in common? And you can always go back to sports, you can go back to music, you can go back to our kids. And so it's looking at, in some other communities around America, they're utilizing the police athletic leagues. Mm-hmm. Whether police officers are playing in the league or coaching the league, sure, they're having a role. And that's all we're saying is to create these consistent opportunities that get us away from what creates barriers.
Yes.
So, and it's always back to what do we have in common first? Let's start there. Allow that to be consistent and strengthen our relationships first, so that we could be more open-minded with each other before we go into the law enforcement component in crime. But it gets it to where citizens are more open to share with a friend than they are with this position.
We're talking to Mal Tosi about relationships between the community and police department and the crime problem in Anchorage. I remember I had a friend of mine. He's retired. Thomas Nelson. He was a captain. You know him?
I'm not familiar with him.
Well, he was former APD, and he spent almost I don't know how many hours he would spend a week, but it was a lot at the Fairview Rec Center. And he'd organize basketball leagues, and he got to know a lot of the kids personally. And it seemed to me that he was really very effective, and that he's building the kind of relationships you're describing, where that they don't know him as a cop, they know him as Coach Nelson.
Yes.
And so he was able to, I suppose, serve his community better because there was that basic fundamental trust. He wasn't just a cop walking the beat looking to arrest people. He was actually interested in the betterment of the young people in that neighborhood, and they knew that because they saw him live it.
Yeah. And see, the biggest thing that showed in that, because he was consistent, it showed to those citizens that this guy really actually cares.
Yes.
Because he's here every day. He's not saying that I'll be here every day. I'm here. And I'm going to do. Yes.
I'm sorry. Well, so how do we change the structure of policing to integrate more of that relationship building?
Well, I think that's a great question that hasn't really been asked. That here we are, discussing about how we strengthen relations when we've had those relationships over even the past 10 years.
Yeah.
Because we've had these shootings happen to where we've gathered and created the gang task force, created the tri-borough anti-gang policy teams. And so it was with the transitions of administration that, we lose some of these things. And that happens. We understand that. But it's trying to always stay consistent with our prevention, intervention, and law enforcement message, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But also adding in the community policing component, because we want our communities to empower themselves. It's not always that we have to law enforcement in our communities. It's that they want to play a role.
Right.
But we're talking about many of these communities are low income. So if they are, and if we could provide funding to some of these churches, to some of these community organizations, these grassroots organizations, it would just be enough to give them motivation, incentive to connect the pieces. And because that's where we're missing, is to always work on the relationship that we have now. And over 10 years that, even during 2006, that was the biggest part. Let's get everyone together and let's see from there what are the solutions that we have together. And it was with Kenai, Matsu Valley, and Anchorage that relationship started to build. But just like you said, it fell off. So
that's a shame.
Yeah, and especially with the growth that we're having in our city, the number, they talk about our city being one of the top 5 most diverse in the country. And if that's so, I look at some of the larger cities that have grown in this way with the influx of minorities, that as we come into communities, if we don't support those ethnic communities coming in, then they create their own structure and create their own support system that leaves us out of that system to where they don't trust outside of their circle. Mm-hmm. So, when they come in, we want to catch it early. And that's it, is catch it early, but always reach out, always look to develop these and welcome these relationships, because we can't stop our city from growing. We can only strengthen it through our relationships together. But then our communities would be more open to say, all right, what does the police department need from us? Because we're willing. We got kids here too, and we want a safer community like everyone else.
We're talking to Mal Tosi. We'll take a quick break. We'll continue with Mal. When I come back, I want to ask you, some might say, this is not government's job. Police officers are not youth pastors. this is too ambitious. I want to ask you about that mentality
Okay.
when we come back. Mal Tosi's our guest. 7:44. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Show. $7:46, Dan Fagan Show on a Thursday morning, February 5th. Talking to Mal Tosi. Who I guess most people know about you, Mal. I've heard about you for years. I know that you're real active and you really care about the young people in our community. You spend a lot of time with them. And, I've always, well, not always, but recently I've really come to believe that you're never going to really influence someone and help them see, a better way unless they know you genuinely care about them. And and I'm not just talking about with words. I'm talking about with actions. And it sounds to me like you're the kind of guy who's dedicated his life to letting young people in your community know you care about them and you're there for them. And I think that's why you're probably so effective.
And thank you. And I look back on my life, and I was that kid. I was that kid trying to find a better option, trying to fit in, trying to figure out what I was going to be. And if it was not for a coach or my big brother to play that role in my life, I wouldn't be here. And it wasn't that they ever said that they loved me, but their actions. It was always to know that. But and when that's seen, when someone knows that they're doing this out of the kindness of their heart, then they think about their actions a little more. That they don't want to let these folks down that are there, that are sacrificing for them. So if we can be that consistent piece, and that's where it starts always, is just trying to be there 2 days a week. And at least that kid that might not have a parent knows that he has 2 days a week with that person and looks forward to it. These shootings the recent shootings involve 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds, they're teens.
So sad.
So if a basketball league, if a church was given $5,000 to create an after-school basketball league, I believe $5,000 is worth that time to prevent that 15-year-old, that 14-year-old from making that other choice. And it's not saying that it will. It's saying that we're always trying these options, that we're looking at other ways to connect with our community to provide these options. And these communities that we're talking about do not have the funds. And that's what we're trying to do as well, is we're trying to figure out ways that we could support these communities by fundraising ourselves. So we actually created a group, and after these shootings, there's been many concerned citizens that came together and said, what can we do? It's where we are frustrated with waiting for solutions, but we can definitely be that on our own and connect with our police officers and police departments and say, is there any information that could be shared with us that we can start connecting and seeing without having to get involved in the violent components, we can definitely start making our phone calls. You know, what's great is Anchorage is a small town.
Yeah.
So someone knows somebody that knows something.
Sure.
And so we just need to ask the right questions to the right people and start chasing it as far as we can until we get this resolved. This is how it was done in 2006, in the late mid-90s. It was always to bring folks together so that we can discuss kind of, but you know, now there's been, with these shootings, is that on both sides there's been deaths. So it's, my concern now is just the retaliation side and trying to see how that all looks. But we have to figure out who's on each side and start asking questions to see about resolution.
We're talking about Tosa. You know, there are a lot of people in this community who are doing quite well, and whether they own their own business or they're working for a big oil company, or I mean, just a lot of us that really have quite a bit of resources that we have at our disposal. And, you know, they're hearing this and they're thinking, you know, well, I'd like to help. I'd like to be a part of helping, you know, kids in a community that's maybe there are some economic challenges. Well, what would you say the average Anchorage person could do if they wanted to get involved?
You know, and that's it, is that we created this We Are Anchorage. It's hashtag We Are Anchorage. It's about caring citizens that are saying exactly that question. What can I do to help? I would show up and participate and support an event that's against the violence that's here in our community. I would buy a T-shirt. I would donate. It's just, and even right now, we're saying, okay, let's gather everyone. Let's see who all our supporters, our organizers, our funders are within this group of We Are Anchorage, so that we can go from here and support the pieces that are already in our community as solutions. There's many grassroots folks out there just trying their best to hold on. And so it's this group to try to figure out who's out there doing things already so that we can support them. But if those solutions aren't out there in our community, we're going to push for those solutions to be a part of.
Well, let me ask you the question I brought up before the break. There are some who say, look, these are bad apples. They're going to be bad apples. Police aren't pastors or ministers. Let's just lock them up. And if they break the law, the hell with them. Let's put them behind bars. There's nothing else we can do. What would you say to that mentality?
Well, you know, it's that if we send them to jail, then we're still paying for them. And when they come out, we're still paying for them. And when they have children, we're paying for their children. So we're creating this cycle that continues, that we pay tenfold that what we pay in prevention. Yeah. So it's to look at prevention always as one of the solutions, tied in with intervention as well. Yeah. But law enforcement is the last solution before death. So it's saying that we want to keep them away from jails before. So it's truly about that prevention piece. I was there. I was that kid that definitely I experienced it. So my life is based on the belief that if we provide someone who cares, that can be consistent, and it's an opportunity that appeals to these youth, like football and basketball did to me, that can be the vehicle to teach them the skills they need to be successful. And I learned everything through sports, and was motivated to go to school because of sports.
Right.
And so a lot of my choices are that.
I know you've experienced this, and you've also seen it because of the lifestyle choice you made to get involved. And this is something that I firmly believe in, that the hardest of heart, you know, the kid who's just so mean and angry and nasty on the inside can be broken in an instant if someone reaches out to that kid and shows that kid that they're valuable and that they're cared about. I mean, that hard heart will melt in a heartbeat. And so that's really where we should start, with that premise, right?
Yes, I tell my staff, I tell those that always work with me, if all we have is an hour with this kid, make it the best damn hour we got.
That's right.
Because you don't know what's at his house.
That's right.
So from there, he'll remember you. And if you're there tomorrow, he'll continue to remember you, and he'll continue to look forward to coming to you, and we'll continue to build his life, because that's what we're here to do. Because someone did it for us, and it's not just me. There's other caring, loving mentors out there that are very passionate about the work that we do. It's just we're trying to figure out now that it's much easier to do it together and to maximize our resources because we can make great impact together. So really this We Are Anchorage group is about that, just a collective that's coming together to really make our impact as best as we can. We know the APD has a hard job, so we have to do our part. It's not to point the fingers at any one organization or the APD or the school district. It's saying we have a role to play, and we'll do our part, and we'll do it together, and we'll hold each other accountable because this is our city, and we're proud of this city, and we definitely want to make sure that the future of this city is what it needs to be. I've got 5 kids here, so I'm invested all the way in making sure that this place is what it needs to be for the future.
How do people get involved with the organization?
Right now we have a Facebook. We're working on a website. A lot of work to try to get done, but just there's a great group of folks in there right now just running as best as we can to organize as many things as soon as possible. But hashtag We Are Anchorage is on Facebook, and just representing Anchorage as best as we can.
And you just go there and hit the like button. I'm on it now, and then at least that way you'll get the updates. And
yeah, you'll get the updates. Right now, we're trying to work on a forum with the candidates within the mayoral component to share kind of share this issue, discuss the issue of violence in Anchorage.
Right.
That's our main concern right there. Then after that, we want to fundraise and create an event, or not an event, but we want to fundraise for a cause that we see that is being a solution in our community. But right now, that's the discussion to figure out which ones are truly the ones that we all see together that we want to support.
Hey, you played in the NFL?
Oh, that was so long ago, I forgot, actually. So
No, you did, didn't you?
Yeah, 2000, 2003. So
and who'd you play for?
Stint in there, Arizona Cardinals.
And what position?
I played defensive tackle, defensive end. So I actually went to college on a basketball scholarship. Played 4 years of basketball, and then last 2 years I played football. And 6'6", 325 pounds is kind of hard to pass up on. So.
Where'd you play in college?
University of Idaho. Go Vandals.
Okay. You think what would happen? Do you think if you and I played 1-on-1, would play to 10-by-1s? What do you think?
You know what? I might have to invite you to a horse competition then.
Yeah, because I don't think I can score a point.
Yeah, no, I don't think I'd let you score a point. So I might be nice. So
I got a good set shot.
Okay,
yeah.
The Mayor Sullivan said the same, and we played a horse competition.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had to dunk.
Oh, my God. Well, that's it. You can't dunk.
Exactly. That's the winner right there. That's my snake in the hole.
We'd have to say no dunking.
Okay. Yeah, no, that we eliminated that pretty quick in our competition as well. So.
Well, I've heard so many incredible things about you, and now getting to hear your heart, man, I'm just so impressed with you, and I really appreciate. You got 5 kids of your own.
Yeah, I definitely got my hands full, but truly, this city, I can't say enough about how much the city has done for me and the support it's been for me.
Yeah.
I can only do my part back and continue in that way. So
hashtag We Are Anchorage on Facebook. Go check it out. Hit the like button. Stay in touch with these guys. And, man, I'll tell you, it's a great thing you're doing. Maltosi, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, we'll do our part, Anchorage.
All right,
Talk
man.
to you soon. Have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks so much.
Bye, Dad.
All right, 7:58 is the time. Dan Fagan Show. Our number 569-1080, 569-1080. We're streaming live. danfagan.us. Boy, that was impressive. We'll be back. Well, good morning to you. 6 minutes past 8 o'clock on a Thursday morning. We're just rolling right along. February 5th, 2015, Dan Fagan Show. You know, our good friend Mike Daniels at Country Financial, boy, he's so intelligent and wise and has great wisdom and knowledge when it comes to financial planning. He has assembled quite a team with his country representatives. They've got 15 Country Financial locations in Alaska. 5 in Anchorage, 5 in the Valley. This is a company that has great credibility and has earned that credibility by helping so many people get to a place where they can retire worry-free. And that's a big deal. A lot of people, you know, they think, well, when I stop earning income, will I be able to have a worry-free retirement? Absolutely, if you make the right decisions. The younger you are, the better. Get yourself over to a country representative, and you are going to know right off the bat, 10 minutes into the meeting, you're going to go, wow, these are some things I've never thought of or heard of, and I'm glad I'm here. Country representative, Country Financial, here's the number, 866-COUNTRY, 866-COUNTRY. Go see Mike Daniels and his team over there. Well, I will tell you that was about as impressive an interview as I've ever done. I've heard of Maltosi. I've heard so much about him. I don't believe I've met him personally, other than the conversation we just had. He has 5 kids, and I know that he has had a major impact in the lives of young people. He has 5 kids himself, as I said. And the thing that really struck me is that he himself said he would not be here today if it had not been for a big brother and a coach of his. So he has literally dedicated his life to making sure what happened to him happens to others. That's a beautiful thing. You know, I've really come to believe so much of the actions that we let me put it this way. So many of the decisions we make in life are made based on the condition of our heart. And if you've got a 13, 14-year-old kid, you know, we've had a couple shootings here by kids that age in our town. If you got a kid who maybe his dad ran out on him, maybe his mother's on drugs, or she just doesn't care, or maybe she's working 2 jobs and she's not in his life. Who knows what the situation is? But this poor kid, he's angry. He's bitter. He realizes that his family has no money. He sees nothing in his life that would give him hope for the future. All this kid knows is that all the kids he sees in his neighborhood, they're gangbangers. They're dealing drugs. They're doing drugs. This is his life. This is all he sees. And he's angry. He's bitter. He thinks nobody cares about him. Because, frankly, there are no adults in his life. So he turns to his gangbanger friends. And he gets involved in a life of crime. That's all he knows. It's easy for us who live in our nice neighborhoods and drive our fancy cars and have beautiful homes to sit back and go, what a thug. What a thug. Truth is, no one's ever reached out to that kid. Never showed an ounce of kindness to him. No adult has ever put his hand on his shoulder and said, how you doing, son? What's going on in your life? He's never experienced that. He doesn't have a dad like I did who would, was my biggest fan, always there for me. Every single game I played, sports, basketball, football, didn't matter, baseball, my dad was there. He wouldn't have. I remember one night he had to drive all night. He was up in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he had to drive all night just to get to my football game the next day. He was not going to miss one of my games. That was a big deal to me. And to have the complete opposite, where that literally no one comes to your games. Nobody cares. And you're bitter. You're angry. And here you got a guy like Mal Tosi who has decided, even though he has 5 of his own kids, he's going to reach out to kids like that. And when I say the decisions we make often are based on the condition of our heart, the good news is the condition of our heart can change in an instant. And if someone reaches out to this 14-year-old kid and shows, not just with their words, but with their actions, like Mal does, that they really are cared about, that kid's bitter, angry, hard heart will melt in an instant. In an instant. And he'll become a completely different human being. That's the power of getting involved. That's the power of reaching out and making a difference. And you could hear Mal getting choked up talking about it because he sees it. He sees the stuff firsthand. You know, we're built to be loved. It's who we are. We are not made to be islands. We're not created to isolate ourselves and build walls around ourselves and not have those loving contacts with other people. That's not how we were created and built. And it's true for kids. It's true for adults. It's true for old people. No one was created and built to be an island. Now, sometimes we choose that. We choose that lifestyle. We say, I've been hurt too much. I'm going to wall up and put walls all around me, and I don't want to have any interaction with people. I don't want to care about people. If I do, I'll get hurt, and that hurts too bad. So we quit, and we live out the rest of our lives alone. And that's a tragedy, too. But then there are also people who want to be loved and who have not quit, but no one's reached out to them. And that's usually kids in lower economic neighborhoods. Man, I sure appreciate Mal Tosi and what he's doing. I know he ran for office. I should ask him about that. I'll tell you what, if he ever runs for office again, I am 100% behind that man. That was a heart of gold I was listening to. That was a man with a heart of gold. 569-1080, 569-1080. That's the number. Broadcasting to you on KOAN, KVNT, danfagan.us is where we're streaming live. We're very happy you're with us. Glad you found the broadcast. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Time 8:14. 8:16 in the morning. Good morning to you here on the Dan Fagan Show. 569-1080. 569-1080. Oh, so chilly. So chilly outside. Let me give you the temperatures here. Not that you need them. You know it's cold. Really, there's no real reason to give you the temperatures on a day like today. Well, here's what they are. One in Anchorage. That's 1. -2 in Palmer. 0 in Eagle River. Girdwood, 12. Girdwood's always toasty. They moved to Girdwood. High today, 17, sunny. 5-day forecast, nothing but sunshine. But highs in the teens. 16 tomorrow. High only 8 on Saturday. And then Sunday, it'll get up to 10. Ooh, baby. Monday, 12 degrees. Sunny, sunny, sunny. And then snow possibly later in the week. So lots of rigid cold weather on its way in the next Well, that's some interesting facts, David. We appreciate your thoughts on that. 569-1080, 569-1080, 826 is the time. Here's a list of I couldn't agree with this more. 10 most disappointing chain restaurants. I'm not a chain guy. I don't like chain restaurants. I never have. My brother-in-law agrees with me on this. Especially, when you're from New Orleans and there's just so much. I mean, you look like a place like Club Paris. You just can't get better food than Club Paris. And you can go to a chain and anyway, here's the top 10 disappointing chain restaurants. Olive Garden, number 1 or number 10. I agree. I remember, didn't eat at Olive Garden for years because it wasn't up here. I was like everybody else. They opened. I had remembered Olive Garden, went there. No, that wasn't very good. Went back. Nah, this is no good. Not impressed with Olive Garden. TGI Fridays, same thing. Applebee's, same thing. Red Lobster, absolutely. Everything's frozen at Red Lobster before they cook it. And here's what I disagree with. Golden Corral. I like Golden Corral. I do. I think they've got great selection. The meat that they have, that's just kind of how I judge restaurants. They actually have good steak there. And I like Golden Corral. Sbarro, I don't think I've ever eaten there. Those are usually at malls. Planet Hollywood. Interesting. Planet Hollywood. I had a ribeye at Planet Hollywood downtown 2 or 3 weeks ago. I thought it was decent atmosphere. The music was a little loud for me. Panda Express, not a Chinese food guy, and then Chili's. Not really that much of a Chili's fan. Actually, Chili's has pretty good salad. The buffalo chicken wing salad is pretty good at Chili's. And then Hard Rock is. I was thinking Planet Hollywood. Hard Rock is where I had the ribeye, but Hard Rock is also one of the top 10 disappointing franchises. I don't know. I enjoyed my ribeye at the Hard Rock downtown. I don't know that I've had Planet Hollywood in a long time. I think I ate at the one in Las Vegas there once, but yeah, I like the restaurants where it's the mom and pop. I'll tell you, it's a great restaurant. It's Korean VIP. No, it's not Korean. Maybe it is. It's something VIP Korean. It's over on Northern Lights, and they bring you these little teeny dishes of all. You literally, whatever your main meal is, they'll bring you a dozen tiny little samples of all this good Korean stuff. And I've been to Korea. Korean food is off. Korean food in Korea is good, and this place reminds me of the food that I had in Korea. It's authentic. Most Chinese food, it's not Chinese food. I've been to China, and believe me, the food in China is so different than the food here that they call Chinese food. Most Chinese restaurants are owned by Koreans anyway. It's the same with sushi restaurants too, by the way. Even though sushi is a Japanese delicacy, most of the restaurants. Matter of fact, I don't know if this is still true. That about 10 years ago, Yamato Ya, the owner of that restaurant, he has since retired, Ken's son, he was the only Japanese owner of a sushi restaurant in Anchorage. Now, they've got so many new sushi restaurants open now. I don't know that that's still the case. But I like that authenticity. I don't want a Greek cooking my Italian food. I don't want an Italian cooking my Greek food. And there's nothing worse than Italian, Greek, Chinese, specialize in something, be authentic, be like the homeland cooking, and I'm in. 8:30, Dan Fagan Show. Good morning to you. 834 Dan Fagan Show. Glad you're here. 569-1080. 569-1080. Lots to report to you today. This is sad. KGB Road. Wasilla resident is dead after a single vehicle crash on the Kinnick Goose Bay Road early this morning. Troopers say that a Dia Petite was driving a 1997 Chevrolet pickup shortly after midnight when the vehicle left the road, striking a utility pole. This is mile 5 of the Kinnick Goose Bay Road. Petite was the only one in the vehicle, troopers say. And that Dia Petite is died as a result of the crash, one car crash. Sad story. Be careful out there when you're driving. When we hired Governor Parnell for a couple of years as governor, she brought the state employees from 16,000 to 20,000. So we had 20,000 state employees as a result of Governor Palin's 2.5 years in office. Then when she quit and ran for the hills, Governor Parnell took over, and he brought us up to 24,000 state employees. Well, now Governor Walker has decided to reverse the trend because we're apparently having a fiscal crisis. Employees of layoffs. Of the 24,000 employees that we currently have, he's going to lay off 300. That's 300. It's not 3,000. 300. 24,000 people. 300 is what. And of course, a lot of those will end up being positions that are empty and be eliminated. So that's always a big deal. So how many actual people will be laid off? Who knows? Maybe none. My guess, and look, this is based on my experience covering government most of my life. I've covered legislatures, legislative sessions. I've covered politicians. I've covered government. I've done a lot of government waste stories. My guess is if we had private sector work ethic employed in government sector, we could do the same amount of work with half the people. Now, that's an educated guess. Because in the private sector, if you're not carrying your weight, you're gone. In the government sector, if you're not carrying your weight, you're protected by the unions. And you're paid about 35% more than those in the private sector. So with those two facts, not opinions, facts, I think I can take an educated guess to say that we could probably lose half of the 24,000 state employees and still probably get the same amount of work done. I could be wrong. Maybe it's more. Maybe we could lose 16%. I don't know. I know you can't fire government employees. So you don't really know who's getting. Look, we're all human, folks. I'm not calling government employees lazy. I'm not. If you work for the government, I'm not saying you're lazy or stupid or incompetent. But I'm saying you're human. And when you work in an environment where it does not matter whether you do your job, it doesn't matter if you can actually perform the task assigned to you. It doesn't matter if you're good at what you do or if you try hard. And if you're a human, unless you're an exceptional person, chances are you're going to slack. Especially if you know that if your boss comes after you, that your union delegate or your union cover is gonna shut your boss down. Especially if you know you can't be fired. I mean, get caught with a big old bag of cocaine in your desk, I suppose they'll fire you then. But not if you're not doing your job. That's certainly not cause for dismissal. So to say we're going to cut 300 of the 24,000 state employees when, 6 years ago we only had 16,000 state employees and we were doing just fine, is not really a serious reduction of government. And my hope was that these low oil prices would cause us to actually reduce the size of government to a sensible size. That was my hope. But 300 employees, come on. And of course the media, big headlines. Walker warns Alaska state employees, layoffs ahead. I'd like my chances. If I was one of 24,000 and only 300 of us were going to lose our jobs, I wouldn't lose any sleep over that. Especially when you take all the positions that have not been filled. But that's what Mr. Walker campaigned on. He said he's going to reduce government, and to the degree with Vince Beltrami standing there behind his back overlooking what he's doing, I didn't expect much. Another big story today, credibility is everything in journalism. You don't have to be perfect, but you do have to be honest. You can get a story wrong. I've gotten many stories. I will just tell you, as a reporter, there were times when I would go out and report something that was not true. I never reported anything that was not true that I knew was not true. I remember I one time they set me down on the down turning an arm, and there was a report of a whale that was beached that had died. Oh, no. It was a report that a whale was struggling and it was trying to get back up to shore. So we went down there with our big $750,000 satellite truck, big crew. I'm going live. And as we're going down there, there's a whale literally dead on the shore. So, it's so sad. Let's do the live shot. I'm talking about the whale. Whale's dead. So sad. We're all sad the whale's dead. Did the story. Turns out that was another whale. That whale had been there for like 2 weeks. Fish and Game called us and said, that's not the whale. So the whale that was stranded actually made it back to shore. And I'm sitting there reporting that the whale's dead. Now, that was a major mistake. And it was one of the black marks on my career of journalism. And John Tracy was not happy, as he should not have been. But obviously, I didn't report it knowing I was wrong. And I learned something from that story. I always learned from that moment on, don't report things unless you know they're true. Only report what we know. And what I should have done is said, this is a whale here. We don't know if this is the whale that was stranded. It could be. We're not sure. That's the way I should have gone at it. But I just went at it as though, here's the whale. We found the whale. My heart was good. My motives were good. I just wasn't being thorough. I wasn't being smart. So that's one thing. You can go as a journalist and make mistakes. But when you lie, when you say you were forced to land because you were shot at, like Brian Williams admitted, and then it turns out now the fellow soldiers that were with him said, no, that's not what happened. He says he misremembered. You don't misremember something like that. So that's a major hit on Brian Williams' credibility, in my opinion. 569-1080, 569-1080. It is a Thursday morning. Tomorrow, by the way, is Friday. That's right, Friday. You're listening to the Dan Fagan Radio Show. It's 8:44. Well, we're just rolling right along here. 8:46 in the morning. Dan Fagan Show. KOAN, KVNT. Want to remind you, right after this show, Eddie Burke, 9 to 11. Is it 11? Yeah, 11. And then starting next week, Joe Miller, 2 to 4. And then, of course, Glenn Legal Beagle on at 4 o'clock, 4 to 6 every afternoon. And Bonnie, our good friend Bonnie's back. She'll be co-hosting with Glenn Legal Beagle in the afternoon. That's a show you do not want to miss.